Is Connor McDavid getting shafted? To be clear, I'm not asking if McDavid deserved a 3-game suspension for his cross-check to Conor Garland's face. We've debated that to death. No, we're bringing in Chris Johnston for a look at the bigger picture. To that in a moment, CJ, but first some news to share.
Yes, and that's that Connor McDavid will not be launching an appeal of the NHL Department of Player Safety's decision on that 3-game suspension. And it's not because he necessarily agrees with the ruling. I can tell you that there's a fair amount of disappointment around the Oilers and those close to McDavid with where the Player Safety Department went with this. But, there's also a sense that this appeal process isn't set up to have success for players. And, the way it works, of course, is if a player wants to appeal a 3-game suspension, it goes to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. Historically, that's not seen many suspensions reduced over time. And so McDavid will take his medicine here. He'll serve those 3 games and return to the Oilers lineup next week.
All right, CJ, let's get to the bigger picture now. McDavid is being held accountable for his actions. But is it time to take a closer look at the lack of accountability for what he goes through on a regular basis?
Well, I certainly think that's at least a discussion point that should be had around this. And as you mentioned, it's not to certainly excuse him for the use of his stick there. We've seen other players, other star players like Austin Matthews suspended in the past for cross-checking infractions. But, nothing happens in isolation. And if you look across Connor McDavid's career at his per-minute penalties drawn, according to Natural Stat Trick, this season is the season that he has drawn the fewest penalties per minute played during his entire NHL career. And you can understand, of course, there's frustration in that moment. Garland was tied up with him for quite some time as the Oilers were trying to tie that game on Saturday night. And even Chris Knobloch pointed out that, of course, he's going to have a reaction there. And so, it's to spin the conversation in a different direction, not to in any way excuse the way he chose to react to that situation. But, it's quite clear that the Oilers captain is not getting as many penalty calls as he has historically. We've heard him in the past even just say to the referees, we just want you to call the rule book. And I wonder if, as we move forward from this, if that's one of the takeaways that the league takes to heart.
All right, let's go to the trade front now. And it sounds like a deal to move JT Miller to the Rangers over the weekend was so close. The Canucks almost sat Miller for the game against the Oilers on Saturday night, but it fell through. So where are we now on that front, CJ?
Well, just because that trade didn't, reach fruition, completion on the weekend, talks do continue. And they're currently happening with more than just the New York Rangers. I mean, the Rangers' interest in JT Miller goes back, months now. And so I would expect them to continue at this, maybe when things cool off a little bit after the attempt to get it done over the weekend. But, the New Jersey Devils, the Carolina Hurricanes, among those that are believed to still have interest in Miller, wanting to keep active communication with the Canucks on seeing if something can get done. And both of those teams do satisfy what's believed to be an important condition for Miller, that they are based in the eastern part of the U.S. Miller does have a full no movement clause. And so while the Canucks have not yet brought him anything that he has to officially okay, I think the team does understand the parameters, that those are the kind of places he would look to play if the Canucks want to move him. And so I won't offer any predictions on this, this set of talks, because there have been a lot of twists and turns in this discussion on Miller, and prior to that, Elias Pettersson by the Canucks. But certainly the feeling is they're still going to work Vancouver to try and get something done on Miller.
You mentioned Elias Pettersson. I want to follow up on that. When all this conversation about somebody's got to move out of Vancouver, it was JT Miller and or Elias Pettersson both being moved out. Now it seems like all the talk that we're hearing, at least publicly, seems to be surrounding JT Miller. Does that mean the Canucks are less interested in moving Elias Pettersson, or does that mean those talks are just quieter?
I would characterize it as less likely at this point, but I don't think anything can be ruled out given the degree of conversations that have had on these two files. The focus does seem to be primarily on Miller, who of course is an older player. But the Canucks perhaps could pivot back to Pettersson if they can't get something done with JT Miller. I think it's a dangerous game right now to guess where this is going, because it has been so public. It's really an unusual type of situation. But it seems as though things have quieted down on Pettersson. The belief is he does want to stay in Vancouver. He has his own no movement clause that kicks in as of July 1st. And so, I do think that Miller is the more likely of the two to be moved at this point. But stay tuned. Until something happens, nothing has happened.
All right, that's all the latest news as we have it right now. The full version of Insider Trading with CJ and Pierre is coming up later on the early edition of SportsCenter.